This is a medium that I did really well with as a kid, and a medium that my students, especially my ELL population, and my students with special needs thrived on. It was a way that my students could look at the same topic as my higher achieving kids, do the same level of analysis on the same topic, but do it with material that was a little bit easier. Because what they did was analyze the text, yes, but because there's less, they also analyzed pictures. So these are the kinds of things that my students talked about when we went over this piece. My students like to talk about this idea of hurdles, because they say there's two ways to deal with hurdles, right? What are those two ways? You can knock them down or you can jump over them, right? What's the difference? If we think of it in symbolic hurdle, knocking down versus jumping over. Say it again?
It's violent.
You can avoid it.
You can avoid it.
Run
You
around.
can shove yourself through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, knocking them down is an act. It's more aggressive than jumping over them. That's rising above it.
Or a conformity issue.
And what does he do? Does he knock them down?
He does for a while. And then
Well, let's look at the way he deals with the physical hurdles. What does he say?
This is
I jump over them.
Jump over the hurdles.
So he's never seen
He
himself
jumps
as a
over
person
them.
who barrels through. Never seen himself as aggressive or violent. He simply jumps over them as they come, right? Okay. The next thing that my students always like to talk about is why is it this perspective is not straight on? It's down. So if we're thinking in terms of a camera, the person who's looking is way lower than the actual image, okay? What does that do for you as a reader when you are this far down looking up at it?
possibly high.
Possibly high, and he still has to jump over them, right? There's impact there. Okay. The other thing that my students love talking about is pair nose. They talk about why is it he's so far away? What does that mean? Why is it you never see his hands? Why do you never know what he's up to? Why does he never show his cards? Why is it you never get to look him in the eye? You never get to see him as he is. You never know what he's thinking, and you can never physically get close to him. What does that represent when we think about hurdles and when we think about discrimination?
To distance himself.
Distance. A person who's that far away from something that they're judging, do they really get what it's about?
No.
No. So this is a good way to talk about what it means to not be tolerant because you don't understand what it is you're trying to say you don't like. If you don't get it, you can't form an opinion about it. But he forms opinions anyway, doesn't he? Even though he's far away, he still forms his opinions. The students also love talking about this image up here and this idea of the beaten path and what that means. Beaten path means everybody stays in line. Everybody does what coach does. Everybody does exactly what he says, and you never disobey, right? It's my way and only my way. And he makes a decision to get off that beaten path. And by doing that, suddenly the coach goes from being here to being here. He's physically in his space, right? He's distant until he's ready to say, you are not on the beaten path. Get back to where you're supposed to get. He does this by insulting him. Why is it that in all of the frames, there is no text here the way there is in the other ones? This one has two images. All the others have just one and text.
Well, that's the point at which they confront each other.
Okay.
Connect, so to speak.
My students say it doesn't need explaining, that it speaks for itself. There's no background necessary, that you get it because you see it and you feel it. They also talk about this idea here of seeing him run off. That there's real power in the fact he didn't get back on that beaten path and that he left. And yet at the same time, they feel bad when that's the choice that they make as kids. That when you decide to not confront, but instead choose differently and walk away, as a kid, that is a really hard choice, and it feels like running away more than it feels like choosing to deal with your hurdle differently. Because in reality, he dealt with the hurdle, right? He made a decision. But what the kids see and what the kids feel is that he feels like he's running away. because he's not sticking it out. And he's not finding a way to still be a part of this in spite of what he's faced with. And that's something that when it comes to two-ness for my kids, and how do you be both of these things, especially if you're a kid who has a multicultural background, how do you live both as this and this and reconcile those two things, those identities? And our kids, whether you're multicultural or not in your background, the idea of being a kid and a young adult and a student, they're all very different identities, and they know what it's like to come up against things even if it's not race-based.